Before you act, listen. Before you react, think. Before you spend, earn. Before you criticize, wait. Before you quit, try. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today, prospects for the year 2022 and how did we fare in the year 2021. To discuss all this and more, we've invited four guests to our studios this evening as well. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us this evening on Face the Nation are Kirti Tennakon, former governor of the central bank, former governor of the central province of Sri Lanka. We're talking about banks all these days. So in the tip of my tongue is the bank. However, we are not talking about the central bank bond controversy today, at least not for now. So joining us this evening on the show are Rajit Kirti Tennakon, former governor of the central province, Professor Tissa Vitarana, member of parliament of the Sri Lanka Pudujana Peramuna, Kesaralal Gunasekara, former member of parliament and council, Dehavel Mountain Municipal Council, representing the SLFP, as well as Dr. Ajanta Pereira, representing the United National Party as well. Let me quickly start off tonight's show with Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former member of parliament, councillor, representing the Dehavel Mountain Municipal Council as well. Mr. Gunasekara, interestingly, we've seen 2021 unfolding quite badly for the government. The SLFP is one of the ruling parties of this coalition government as well. How did we fare in the year 2021? Did we fare well? Did we fare okay? Or did we fare bad?
As to whether I can give a direct answer is
you have difficult. 3 minutes, good 3 minutes.
It's difficult. We need to understand that there were so many issues which went against the government as well, or the country as well. But hindsight, I feel that we faltered as well. As to whether they could have been avoided or averted is something that can be discussed. The going is not easy, you know. In 2021 also, 20 also, we had the same problem. 21 was also extremely difficult. But I feel that we have to understand that governance is a complicated area, and unless you fit into a complicated operation, you will always have problems, and that is exactly what happened. Most of the issues were not managed properly. The government at the same time was not in a position to give prominence to whatever programs that they initiated. The social media was very vibrant, and as a result, the social media had a field day, I would say. So in that backdrop, the exercise of the government should have been to monitor the social media and get the feedback. That's how you govern, you know. You have to find ways as to why things are going against or why things are faltering. If you don't do that, then governance becomes a very complicated activity. That I feel happened because I will give you one simple example. We had an economic forum requesting various agencies to come in and support. There were two mistakes that we made. We were not in a position to do that because we were going down rapidly. We had a problem with regard to our foreign reserves as well. And add to that, we had the commander of the army addressing that forum, which I felt was a mistake. I have nothing against him. Huh? He had done a wonderful job with regard to what was handed over to him. But getting him to speak at an economic forum gives a mixed signal. It's a different signal, you know. Those are mistakes that the government made. And in that backdrop as to how we can overcome all this is a tremendous exercise. I think 2022 is going to be extremely difficult. And we have to manage it in such a way that we don't, because you have to understand the government, the time period of the government goes on for another good 4 years. So it's not an easy exercise to topple an administration. It's not an easy exercise. So we have to focus as to how we are going to halt the slide. Very, very simple terms. How we are going to halt the slide of the country. If you can do that, then the movement up thereafter is a secondary question.
Mr.
That
Gunasekar,
is
you're
all
talking
that
about,
we should do.
Mr. Gunasekar, you're talking about a slide. However, in the eyes of the public, it's completely dilemma. We are in a plunge at the moment. Slide is a better word.
I use diplomatic terms. You got to understand. I have to use diplomatic terms. I don't disagree with you at all, because you can always refer to it in that manner. But you must understand that we need to halt whatever debacle or whatever slide that is going on. If you don't, we are in serious trouble. And as to whether we can do that immediately, I don't know, because discussions have to take place. Discussions have to commence. It's not that easy. I mean, this is not an exercise where the cabinet sits and decides. No, you can't. It's much more complicated than that. So the people who love this country in the political arena needs to get down to business and say, okay, can we come into an agreement as to how we are going to manage the rest of the period? Because that is important, that is crucial.
But Mr. Gunasekar, you speak about the cabinet deciding things. However, in this situation, the cabinet is not even aware of what is happening. Former member of parliament as well as minister, a well-renowned minister, D.W. Gunasekar, speaking to the media, said that this is the worst cabinet he has seen since independence. Now that raises an eyebrow at the end of the day for anyone who's looking at the cabinet.
Yeah.
Can they manage? Can they govern? Can they do the governance that the people are expecting properly? Big question mark.
I know. Now, a person of the caliber of D.W. Gunasekar coming out in that manner, the government has to understand it's a very, very serious statement. Because he's an experienced politician. He can read things, you know. He can read into the future as well. What he said technically is correct. We have a serious problem. As to whether the government has realized that, whether the cabinet has realized that, is a question.
Mr. Gunasekar, now you are part of the government.
Yeah.
Your party is part of the government, and you all have 15 members of parliamentarians who are attached with the SLFP and who are supporting the government cause. Now, if you are seated here today and you are telling us that we are in an abyss, what can the people expect?
Well, my duty is to tell as to where we stand. I believe in one thing. Don't fool the masses. Don't ever fool the masses. If you fool the masses, you are in serious trouble. You should never do that. That's my role, I feel. In that context, I'm saying this.
Are we on the ledge? Are we in a dilemma? Or have we already fallen into an abyss?
It's a combination of all those, Shamil. It's a combination of all those.
It's a combination of all those. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen in the next year. Only time will tell where this government is taking the people of this resplendent island nation. Can we call that next year? That's a big question mark. We now move our attention to Professor Tissa Vitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Pudujana Penamuna, representing the ruling coalition today on Face the Nation. Professor Vitarana, this government came into power asking for so many things from the people. They wanted a resounding majority in Parliament. The people voted in, 6.9 million votes came in. The government wanted 2/3 majority. That was given to this government as well, on a platter. The government wanted the 20th Amendment to the Constitution to be passed. That was given on a platter to the government as well. They wanted Basil Rajapaksa, the man with 7 brains, to come and play the game of the pawns in this chess game that we are experiencing at the moment. That was also given. What did the people get? Gas crisis, fertilizer crisis, forex crisis, cost of living crisis, no gas right now in the market, no sugar. There was a time there were long queues. This is what the people got. What is the government doing? Can they sustain themselves in the year 2022? How have they performed in the year 2021? What is your opinion?
Well, I would agree with Kesra in the statement that we can't be happy with the performance in 2021. The problems really which affect our nation are, especially on the economic front. I'm not going to put too much weight on the COVID side of it, because whatever government is in office, it is confronted with a disease problem like that and has to respond to that in, shall I say, a fairly standard medical methodology. But where the economy is concerned, it is, I would say, lacking a plan. There is no clear identification of the main problems. A solution to those problems have not been evident, and it's just carrying on with business as usual. When the situation really demands a detailed analysis, a very critical analysis, and a firm course of action thereafter. The difficult position that the country is faced with should have been made very clear to the people. Not to carry on as before, in fact, over a long period. I would say this aspect is a feature of our Sri Lankan politics also, where we don't clearly indicate the magnitude of the problem facing the country. And to draw a parallel, we are today facing a severe economic crisis. And if I go back to 1970, when Dr. N. Emperor was finance minister, the first thing he did was to say that the situation is bad and we have to tighten our belts and have a planned course of action to get the country out of the crisis situation that it is facing. That type of thing has not been done. The people carry on, the officers function, the programs are arranged and performed as if everything is continuing as before, without any change in the situation.
Professor, let's not go back that far, where Minister N. Pereira mentioned that people have to tighten their belts. In 2008 June, in Sri Lanka, when President Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president of the country, he spoke about tightening the belts of the public because we were fighting a war, we were facing a global financial crisis. So the people heeded that call from the government. I recollect fuel price hikes came in June 2008, and there were a big ha-ho about why fuel is being increased and so on and so forth. However, right now there is no clear-cut communication that is coming in from the government. This is sending mixed signals not only to the people but also those who are in government ranks. Now, right now, take a look at what's happening, Minister. Approximately 50 to 60 MPs, based on the newspaper reports that we are seeing, have gone overseas. Are the parliamentarians acting with true wisdom, acting as an example to the public and taking the problem at stock and making sure that they keep an example to the public at large?
No, shall I put it this way? The government as a whole should have discussions within its members, and really what we face is a austerity situation. One where we have really to limit the spending of our resources, limited resources. Our foreign exchange situation has come down badly. Internally, we have a inflationary situation, high prices. People are, I would say that I'm going on figures which were made available to me by the Medical Research Institute in which I worked earlier. 60% of families are, the income is below the poverty line. 18% is the malnutrition rate. So these are disturbing figures. Now, I try to convey some of these figures to people who are in a position of making a decision, because I am not in, I'm in the LSSP, though part of this government, and there are no discussions, there are no, shall we say, exchanges of view or anything like that taking place. For instance, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was president, party leaders used to meet with him once a week and discuss the situation. Now today, we have had no meetings of that nature.
Are you suspecting that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa can't govern the country, let alone govern a political party in question?
Well, that only time will show, right, what is happening. But I think when a country is facing a crisis situation, when a government is confronted with the responsibility of taking the country through this situation on behalf of the people, then an effort should be made to get maximum, shall we say, cooperation and exchange of views with the partners in the alliance.
But they quickly take quite knee-jerk decisions, Professor, now.
No?
They take knee-jerk decisions. Now take a look at the Minister of Agriculture, for an example. The Minister of Agriculture at one point said, no chemical fertilizer will be imported at any cost. And he went on record saying, my responsibility is not towards the people, but towards the government and the president, the head of state. I will unconditionally stand with the president. Now that was a statement that was made by the Minister of Agriculture. Then what happened? Suddenly a reversal of the decisions. How many gazettes have been reversed, Professor Vitarana? Now you are representing the LSSP. Aren't you all ashamed of being a part of this government?
Well, decisions with regard to being in a government is determined by a number of factors. We certainly don't want to be in the situation of the previous government, right, where we were, shall we say, having what I would refer to as neoliberal policies, which were directed towards serving the interests of the United States and not of the people of our country.
You think, Professor, right now the government in power is not thinking about the United States?
It is.
Power project.
Yes, I know. It is.
Now a lot of people are saying, Professor Vitarna, that at least the Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe administration was better than this administration in power. At least we were not facing such a dilemma at that point. Do you agree?
Well, I am disappointed by several decisions that were taken, several courses of action, which have gone where the government has gone back on its word that it will not sell our assets to foreign countries, and this is taking place. There is American influence which is affecting the decision making of the government to a greater extent than we expected. And
no, but when looking at the statements that are being made by powerful cabinet ministers, now one example, Professor, was Johnston Fernando saying that we don't have to read the cabinet paper. We will sign whatever comes. That is collective responsibility. Now, Professor, you've been in cabinet. You've been in cabinet, right, with the previous government?
Yes, previous government.
Yeah, previous government, you were in cabinet. Will you make such a statement?
No, certainly not.
Doesn't that go on to show that this crowd, the Vietmaga crowd, have lost the plot?
This, I would say that really the government is not facing the reality, the situation both externally and internally, which are grave, and as I mentioned earlier, really call for a policy of austerity, where people control the spending of money to essential items.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll come back to you, Professor. You spoke about policy of austerity. If there was any austerity measures that need to be taken, that has to first start from the cabinet of ministers. The Minister of Finance should start staying in Sri Lanka rather than going overseas. Anyway, Professor, we'll get back to you later momentarily as the show goes on. Now I move my attention to Kirti Tendakon, former governor of the central province, governor of the southern province of Sri Lanka. Kirti, now interestingly, I want to talk about the role of the opposition. Now, there was a time when there was a fuel price hike in Sri Lanka. The opposition, led by Mahinda Rajapaksa, came in bicycles to parliament. There were times when the fuel price formula came into play, there was action taken by the opposition parties at that time. When the central bank bond controversy took place, there were protests outside the Central Bank of Sri Lanka during the second week of the bond controversy itself. There were a lot of action taken by the opposition at that time. However, right now, the opposition seemed to be taking a wait-and-see policy. We see several members of the opposition, people like Harsha De Silva, are quite active, vociferously expressing their concern. We saw the manner in which he was trying to go and buy some vegetables yesterday in a three-wheeler. That is quite unnecessary at the moment, because people all have realized how difficult it is to live in the country at the moment, given the cost of living, which stands at 11.1%. But what is the role of the opposition, Kirti? Is the opposition doing their job right? Isn't that a big question mark?
I mean, it's a very interesting question when it comes to the opposition. I mean, we are having a crisis. Everyone agrees on that. There's no argument about that. The present scenario, the government is having a problem, and actually, if you go into the details of that, the government in crisis, of course, the opposition is in a much bigger crisis. And opposition is in a much bigger crisis, just because it's very clear that the opposition is not doing their supposed to be done sort of a job. The reason why I'm saying this is, I mean, in one hand, we know we are having a political crisis. There's no governance. When it comes, you were during the show, we were talking about that the Kesar and the professor is telling about that, and you were continuously mentioned the role of the cabinet, and it is not functioning in according to the books, of course. Then, when it comes to the economic crisis, we know that there are ways and means of handling these sort of a situation, and that is from the ruling side, the coalition is not adequately doing that thing. It is not very much addressed, and there are various different things. When it comes to the opposition, I mean, throughout the history, the opposition had a very vital role in this sort of environment. Number one, to address the very basic principles when it comes to the democracy. Number one, from the opposition perspectives, human rights was never neglected after 1978. Whoever the leader of the opposition, whoever the party is taking control of the main opposition, for that matter, that aspect was very much intact. When there's an issue, it was addressed. I mean, is that basic point is addressed in this with this opposition? When it comes to the economy or the state of finance and the role of the parliament in related to the finance, state finance for that matter, is it addressed accordingly? My understanding, it is not. I mean, the opposition is just criticizing, but they are not coming up with a program. They are not giving a suitable or possible scenario when it comes to a sustainable solution. And moreover, we have seen that the opposition is very much divided. I mean, when it comes to the very basics of Sri Lankan politics, we know in one hand we are having the ruling party, or I mean most of the centralized with the SLFP, or I mean it can be Puhutuar or whatever, the SLFP, CP, or the alliance factors and all that. So in the other hand, we are having the UNP and the Green Coalition for that matter. So the people who supported Sajith Premadasa in 2019 presidential election, now that particular group is divided at least into 6 different factors. But the UNP, Sajith Premadasa's SJB, and there are 9 members who was elected under the SJB is now supporting the government. 7 members from the Muslim Congress, Rishad Badodin and Aravind Kumar plus Diana Gamage. And there are some other people, some parliamentarians who was not a part of the coalition or the government, but indirectly they are supporting the government.
Kirti, you are a political analyst. You've been in this game for a very long time. You know exactly what was going wrong with the UNP administration, even in the 1992-1993 era, where Gamini Dissanayake split from the UNP and formed his own political party. As a result of that, the UNP suffered a huge blow at the 1994 presidential election because they did not have anyone to contest the election on a formidable platform. However, when looking at your conduct, now you have supported the SJB at the last presidential Lanka general election. Maitri Gunaratne contested from the SJB ticket from the Madula district. Shilal Laktilaka was in the national list of the SJB. Azad Sali was in the national list of the SJB. However, during the recent week, you go and meet the UNP.
Yes,
Is that a deal? Is that a political deal as well?
If you can, if someone can separate these two parties, UNP from the SJB, I don't think no one in this country or the people who was familiar with the scenario, political, outlook of the country. There's no difference. Is there a policy difference from the UNP to the SJB? No, nothing. The faces. The father is, if you are having a meeting in Ratnapura, the father goes to the UNP rally while the wife goes to the SJB rally. If there's two sons or the two daughters down there, just wait.
That's very easy for you to say. The father goes to the SJB
no,
rally.
That is exactly, that is exactly,
Because 2 weeks ago, Kirti, when you were on this very show, when I asked you a question, tell me, who are the formidable candidates at the next election in Sri Lanka? Presidential election, you mentioned a few names.
Yeah.
And I can mention...
No, there are 7 members who was doing the campaign, to be very specific, there are actually, at that time, there were 6 members who was doing the campaign from the opposition. Now, 2 weeks after that, there are 8 candidates who doing that.
Let's not talk about 8 candidates, let's talk about the 4 candidates that you spoke about that day.
No, there are 6 candidates.
Yeah, Sarath Fonseca, Andrew Kumar Disanayaka, Sajith Premadasa, partly Chambikaranamaka. Are the 4 candidates?
No, Velgama has already started his campaign. Rajitha Senaratne has already started his campaign. And UNP with the meeting, we got to know that UNP is definitely...
Let me ask a question, will you?
Let me ask a question. You are reducing the numbers, so that's what I want to be specific.
It seems to me that the 4 of you are trying to create that split, which would give the 4 of you an added advantage at the next election.
Definitely, your question is wrong. We never in history...
because we saw this happening in 1992 and 1993. There was a small group that broke away from Gamli Disanayaka's crowd who broke away and for now. This is a history.
2 different scenarios.
Yeah, but isn't that the same thing that is happening now with
No, it's totally 2 different scenarios. Here, after losing the presidential election in 2019, we were very much clear. At that time, we were, against the UNP leadership, Ranil Wickremesinghe, and everyone knows that part of the history. But here, after defeat of the presidential election, we met the UNP leader, and we talked with the several factors with the who supported Sajith Premadasa, and we very clearly said, if we going to divide, if the party is going to divide and contest elections in different platforms and all that, different parties for that matter, we will have this sort of problem. Yes, it happened. At least 2 million people didn't come to the polling stations. They didn't vote either, UNP or the SJB. So that creates this particular sort of a weak opposition.
At the next election,
that weak opposition provided...
so at the next election, you all are supporting Sajith Premadasa's candidature to be the president of the country.
We are individuals who are talking about a program, a productive program. We are having a crisis in the government. We are having a financial crisis. We are having the fuel crisis and all that. We can go forth and analyze that part of the thing. Just because of that government is failed, it doesn't necessarily says that whatever the main opposition must given power, if they don't have program, if they don't have action plan, if they don't have sincere policy is to that matter.
Right.
For that's what we
Right.
what we are highlighting is very simple. I mean, work on the very basics.
Right.
Work on human rights. I mean, there are 24 cases, court cases in related to the teachers' strike plus.
Yeah.
Right. So, is it a single lawyer from the opposition, UNP or the SJB has sent helping those teachers who was down there?
Right.
So, we need policies.
We'll get back to you. Before the start of the show, I thought there was only a crisis in the government, but seems to me that there's a crisis in the opposition as well.
Definitely, there's more bigger crisis in the opposition, for sure. Yes.
Anyway, so it seems to me that we don't have anyone to bank on at the moment. Anyway, I now move my attention to Dr. Achanta Pereira, once a candidate of the United National Party. Dr. Pereira, you were also a presidential candidate a few years ago. Are you happy that you didn't win the election?
Well, to be very frank with you, I think the mistake that we see today, we can't blame it on Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, because the people in this country, they vote with a totally different mindset. I mean, when we really look at the presidential election that happened in 2019, there were 35 candidates and I was the only female. Now, right from the beginning, people had this mind, if the brother was able to finish the war, the next the next one who's coming, Mr. Gotabaya, will be able to perform even more. This is the attitude that people had. You know, people in this country have wrong attitudes. We are so uneducated. We have a slave mindset. And so with a slave mindset, it becomes very difficult in decision making. And another thing I have to say, when Mr. Gotabaya was the candidate, none of the media actually forced him to come on board and asked him any questions.
No,
I mean, he was hiding.
No. He was in hiding, yeah.
He was hiding.
Yeah.
He was totally hiding. I remember in many of the meetings, Sajid, myself, Anura, and then Mahesh, we were sitting and discussing, but he was missing it all the time. And no one questioned that. And now we see why he did not come, because he would have failed. I mean, if anybody would have had the opportunity to put us all on a platform and ask several questions, he would have failed utterly, because the simple reason is he does not even know his own constitution. I mean, he became the president, I firmly believe, without knowing the constitution, because the constitution, if he knew the constitution, there are so many remedies, because the constitution says very clearly that his target should be to ensure that the people of this country are well fed, well looked after, well protected. His whole mindset should be the prosperity of the people, not himself or his brothers. Now he came with the thinking, my brother performed and we were able to become rich, we were able to gain power, and now when I come, I'm going to sustain at the same level and I'm going to be doing much further.
Dr. Pereira, not fair to get into the mindset of the president and respond to questions, because you can't represent the ideologies of the president himself, right? Dr. Pereira, so I would like you to rephrase your answers a little bit more eloquently to make sure that you don't sit in the mindset of the president, because we don't know what he's thinking.
Well, basically,
so we have to give the benefit of the doubt to the president of the president of the nation.
We have to go by how he performs.
Right.
I mean, look at this way.
When you're making statements as he wants to get rich, he wants to think about the prosperity of himself, that's a bit of far-fetched.
Isn't that what is happening? You see, the thing is,
I don't know, but I'm just telling you to be a bit careful when you're discussing.
Sure. And let's look at how we have been discussing these issues. Now, one of the things that I see here is everyone is so adhered to their political party. Nobody wants to say anything against their party. Nobody wants to be, criticizing their party. I mean, what is the most important thing for a politician? It should be the people. People are at the center of everything that we do. I mean, once you become the president of a country, you have to give up your party. Who says that we need to, make sure that we hang on to our party? I have seen this happening again and again. The moment you become the president, you become the president of the people. And if he had thought it that way, because he had, if you look at the Saubhagya Dakma, the Saubhagya Dakma has a lot of...
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is affiliated to the SLPP, but does not hold any key position within the SLPP. It's Basil Rajapaksa and President Mahinda Rajapaksa who holds positions within the SLPP.
But the thing is, if you really look at it right now...
the last government, President Maithripala Sirisena tried to become the head of the SLFP as well. So that is where the rift between President Rajapaksa and President Maithripala Sirisena took place at the 2015 year itself, for the complete year. Just to correct you there, Dr. Pereira.
Okay, let's say I remember Mr. Maithripala Sirisena very, very well. He was trying very hard to, he was campaigning for the SLFP. But the issue here, when you ask me that question, we were all candidates for the presidency primarily because at that time we saw that there were problems in the country. We saw corruption, which we see at a larger scale now today. It was there even at that time of the presidential election. We saw that there were huge issues of where you would have a situation where the cabinet of ministers would always agree on certain issues, but they would never disagree on issues.
Yeah.
Now, even right
Dr.
now...
Let's get back to corruption and the way in which the government handles things momentarily. Let's talk about mismanagement per se. That's the topic that I want to touch on at the moment.
Sure,
in terms
if you
of
look
the
at
governance,
let's talk about the issue about the president and the minister for agriculture. Now, for example, when you look at the way they talk, now the president he said, I will not allow agrochemicals to be brought into the country. Now, was there anybody who stood, came forward and said, this would not happen? Nobody, none of the ministers ever spoke from the cabinet of ministers and said, this would fail. So the president continued to press on by saying, we will continue to stop the agrochemicals from coming into the country. But if the cabinet of ministers had the ability to disagree with the president or even to guide him and say, okay, according to the Saubhagya Dakma, we are going to achieve that level in 10 years and not immediately, at least the president would have reconsidered it. But no one disagreed with him. This is the way Sri Lanka has been handling every issue for many years, regardless of party politics. We have made mistakes for a long, long time. And I think it's a culmination right now where we see everything has come together, where we see a huge soup, we have made a mistake, and we are really in a mess right now. So I think right now is not a time for talking about party politics, and I think time has come now for us to really analyze the situation in the country and to understand we made mistakes. We made mistakes in decision making, we made mistakes in taking up loans, we made mistakes in how we handled the loans, we made mistakes in monitoring. For example, the last budget was put forward and the majority put their hands up, right? But who asked the question, what happened after the first budget of the last year? What are the progresses? Where are the progresses? What are the outcomes? Nobody questions that. So what we have is a slave mindset. And I'm so sorry, Sri Lanka has a huge slave mindset where the president is there, the prime minister is there, and the cabinet of ministers are constantly bowing down and saying, yes sir, you are doing great, yes sir, you are doing great. As long as that happens, we will never progress.
They don't say you are doing great, they are saying yes sir, 2 bags full sir. That's what they are saying right now, Dr. Pereira. But taking into account, Dr. Pereira, what has happened in the year 2021, are you happy the way in which the government has committed itself, there are some good points as well. The third booster drive that has been taken into account by the government has been well...
Can you speak a little louder?
Right. Right. Can you hear me now, Dr. Pereira?
Yeah.
So the third booster drive that was being driven out by the government is well recognized by many quarters, saying that it's a very good drive. The government did its part in terms of the vaccination drive. The government did its best. So there are some good points.
Yeah,
there are some positive takeaways as well as far as the year 2021 is concerned. Not all that negative, is it?
Well, the thing is, you see, what I see here is, unfortunately, you see, this is where I say the President and the Cabinet of Ministers must study the Constitution first. The Constitution very clearly lays down how you should act. You can't go beyond it. You can't go away from it. Consumer Act, for example, let's talk about the gas issue and the other issues that we are facing right now. We have a Consumer Act, and Mr. Lasantha Alagiyavanna, I don't know whether he has ever read the Consumer Act, because the Consumer Act spells out very clearly, as the Minister of Consumer Affairs, what are the actions he should take. Now, when the gas cylinders began to explode, the first thing he should have done is, he should have called the gas company. He should have told them this is a violation of the act, that the ministry would ask for compensation. He should have started it off a long time ago, because the Consumer Act is so fantastically laid down where the consumer is very well looked after. Number one, competitiveness. Number two, when the consumer is harmed, to get compensation. Number three, to ensure that there is fairness for the consumers. Now, Mr. Alagiyavanna should know all these things. We can't go and teach him now. He has become the Minister for Consumer Affairs. So, this is what I'm saying. Before a person sits on the chair, they should know what they are in for. I mean, how can we go later on and teach them? We can't do that. Mr. Alagiyavanna still has not told the gas companies that compensation should be paid for the people who have had disasters.
Right. Dr. Pereira, thank you very much. Leave alone reading the constitution of the country, the cabinet first have to read the cabinet papers that are forwarded to them for approval. So we open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate right is Azra, manager of English News, and on my immediate left is Jayamal Ratnayaka, who's a well-renowned journalist, as well as posing questions today from the four panelists. So let's start off with Azra.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Shamir. I'll pose my first question to Professor Desavitarana. Professor, the Committee on Public Accounts that you were heading investigated a lot of key institutions that brought in 90% of the government revenue, like the Excise Department, the Customs, the Inland Revenue Department. Now that the Parliament is prorogued, what is going to happen to the investigations? Because you have brought forward a lot of cases, misdeeds and mismanagement. And a lot of cases were revealed, and you have even submitted reports in Parliament. What is going to happen to the investigations now?
Frankly, I must say I'm not certain about what is going to happen because when Parliament meets once again, they will elect COPA as well. It may be the same COPA, it may be a different COPA, I don't know. But the investigations that we did, we went into those three main sources. 90% of our revenue is provided by those institutions. And actually I was supposed to present one report to Parliament, but I presented three. And there I pointed out the various shortcomings, the problems, and suggested various solutions. Now, unfortunately, these are have to be attended to. We can only make recommendations to the minister concerned.
Right.
And it's up to the minister to take action. So now this is all three reports have been tabled in Parliament.
So that's in the public domain. You can't really
Yeah,
raise it.
they are now in the public domain.
Right.
And therefore, it is up to the minister to take action based on that. And whether, in the eventuality that I am not put back in that position that I held earlier, still the issues that have been raised, the recommendations that have been made have to be acted on. And it's up to the minister ministers who will be concerned with them to take due action.
If a new committee is to be appointed, one other similar incident that you have mentioned earlier was that when you were the governor of the North Central Province, how when you were taking some painful decisions to make changes, and unsuitable positions were filled by unsuitable people, and then you eventually had to resign. Is this the same thing happening? Is that the same mindset behind this?
I don't know. All I can say is that I hope that decisions will be taken on the basis of performance, on the benefit to the country and the people, and that the government will think not in terms of who has said this or who has said that, but in terms of the merits of the issues that have been raised and the suggestions that have been made for their resolution, and proceed from that point. Unfortunately, in politics in our country, it's not the substance that seems to matter, but it's a question of where you belong, which party do you belong. If something is said by the most sensible, the most, shall we say, important statement can be made by a political leader, which should be implemented, you will find that people will resist that, object to it, not because the content is bad or anything like that, but because it came from a different party.
So Mr. Gunasekaran, I have a question from one of our viewers who are watching the show tonight. What could we do now to change the current regime? Do we have to bear this suffering for the next few years as well?
That's what I said earlier. We need to discuss this matter. People in Parliament need to discuss this matter. Very important. As to how we are going to move forward, that's very essential. The President needs to understand that there is a lot of opposition, tremendous opposition outside Parliament, which needs to be taken into account. And in that backdrop, decide as to discuss and say, okay, how are we going to manage affairs? That's very essential. Of course, you can ignore all that.
But shouldn't now be the time to implement what are the decisions that have been made? Because
Pardon?
Can we still afford to discuss these things? Shouldn't we be implementing action to solve these problems?
Yeah,
why discuss more? It's obvious, you see it outside.
You know, the question is this: you have to come into an agreement as to what you're going to do. It's not that easy. Whatever the government does, there'll be tremendous opposition unless they come into some agreement with everybody.
But Mr. Gunasekaran, now Professor Tissavitharana said during President Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, there was an all-party conference or a meeting every week. But with this president, he is not open for dialogue. If that case be the scenario, how can these issues be addressed with all parties concerned in Parliament? Isn't that the biggest problem? Not open for dialogue?
Is somebody needs to get this, I mean, discuss this matter. That's very important, no? The Prime Minister, the President, the Speaker, everybody needs to discuss this matter.
But if
they
he's
are
not
discussing,
going to listen, if he's not going to listen.
No, the question is not as to whether he is listening or not. The question is the Prime Minister, the President, the Speaker, the leader of the opposition, are they discussing this matter? Or they are staying away? That's important.
Right, so...
I mean, here, when it comes to the economy, and all the issues related to the dollar crisis and the trade deficit, of course, the balance of trade deficit and all that. I mean, the central bank and the other relevant organizations tried to address this issue, but it was not listened by the president. So that's where the real crisis starts. I mean, just after the presidential election, we know that some central bank officials, well-renowned economists, went to the president when they tried to explain the situation, where this crisis will come into fact, and I mean, the people who's having sound knowledge on economics, they try to address this issue, highlight the facts, and this is actually what's happening now. But at that particular time, but it was not. No, at that time, this particular aspect, the financial crisis, was not addressed. Then, when it comes to the COVID, right? The cabinet of ministers, I mean, the parliament is having sufficient knowledgeable people like Professor Tissavitarana when it comes to the COVID and all that. But who was given responsibility? The head of the army was given responsibility. It was not the doctors, it was not the social sciences, it was not the people who was having a academic background, experience and know-how when it comes to that part.
But
right. When it comes to the agriculture, we had the same problem. Yesterday or day before yesterday, I saw that former Professor Udit Jayasinghe was mentioning on, food crisis. This is what everyone was telling for last 7-8 months. And being a man who was in the field with agriculture, we know how many acres were, cultivated with the Mahavali areas. But we know what is the expected, outcome of that. When it comes to, I mean, we don't have, fertilizer, we don't have it. But here, when it comes to the pesticides and the other basic elements, the basic elements to do the production is not down there. I mean, when it comes to the post-harvest, protection and all that, I mean, if we having enough fungicides for that matter, we can have some sort of.
Okay,
yeah. But
I disagree with him. I disagree with him on that. You know why? The president of Sri Lanka, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, wanted the 20th Amendment. Why did he want the 20th Amendment? So that he can collect everyone and do the work? No. He wanted the 20th Amendment so that he wanted to be a dictator. That's it. And we all knew that. I went to courts against it. People looked at me and said, who are you to go to courts against that? But I went because I knew the repercussions. The repercussions were, he wanted the dictatorship. He wanted to say, he felt that he would govern the country the way he wants to do that. And so that's why he wanted all the power.
No, I mean...
And now... everyone, when we were crying out and saying, don't lift your hand up and say yes, how many people voted? Said yes. Yes, sir.
So Professor Tissavitarana was also one person who voted in favor of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. So you can pose that question directly to Professor Tissavitarana.
And now we can't complain. Now we can't complain.
With Dr. Ajanta's...
now that you bring it up,
yeah.
We, the 11 party leaders who are working with the main party, we disagreed on the 20th Amendment, and we wanted to have a discussion with the President. That meeting took place, and there we said we don't agree with this. and we would like changes in what is being proposed. Then he gave us an undertaking that once he comes into the government gets functioning, within a year, a new constitution will be formulated where our concerns will be addressed. So I mean, coming from the president, executive president, mind you, we have to accept that and continue.
But do you regret now?
If I can add a point here, I and my the party, the SLFP, is totally opposed to the executive president system, because we are a parliamentary system where you have multiple parties and multiple opinions is what we need. Now
but do you agree? Do you agree with the fact?
Agricultural problem where the president said one thing and the Minister of Agriculture said the completely different.
Yeah, so do you agree with the fact, Professor Vitarna, that the decision that was taken by your party prior to the 20th Amendment of the Constitution is not the most prudent decision that you all took?
Well, why do you say that?
Because you just say that you all were against the 20th Amendment of the Constitution. The President had given you an assurance that he's going to change the Constitution within a year. That did not happen now. So do you think that you all regret that decision that you all took at that time?
I mean, if we are working as a unit which is in a position of governing the country, you have to rely on the words or the
correct.
Otherwise, as a team,
you can't go on.
As a team, you can't function unless you come to a common position and expect the promises to be fulfilled.
It's like a bad relationship, Professor, now.
Huh?
It's like a bad relationship. It's like a toxic relationship. These girlfriends and boyfriends get together initially. They promise the world to each other and then they break up. At least that no big harm is created to the country. But this relationship with the government seems to be very toxic.
No, I mean, this is a new relationship. Right?
will you, I mean, the real question here, I mean, will you take that sort of undertaking if it is once again comes from the president? Will you take it, or the SLFP is?
Certainly,
I told you.
You've learned a lesson the hard
Very
way.
interesting.
Learned the lesson the hard way. So,
Very interesting.
So, Kirti, interestingly, we have a question from one of our viewers who are watching Face the Nation, and the question was posed on the Facebook page. Will the JVP candidate be more suitable now with their political vision to a brighter Sri Lanka, since they have all remedies for the issues we face now, if there are no any other option in the country?
In 1956, this DSN Kumaria concept was very much in line, and that's why the Mahajana Eksath Peramuna was capable of coming into power at that particular time. And we have seen so much of DSN Kumarias thereafter, right? So none of them, these DSN Kumarias were functioned, and all our the issues, policies and acts were very much disrupted with this particular individual Superman coming into act and try to heal everything and giving solutions to all our questions, all our issues, all our concerns. It is not going to happen. So here, when it comes to the JVP or a UNP or a SJB or a SLFP or some Samaja or whatever party, I mean, the first number one priority, I mean, we know very basic concerns when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the other sectors, education, which is very much neglected, when it comes to the health, is very much neglected at this particular moment. So, I mean, let's talk discuss about the policies. What is the working arrangements when it comes to implement these policies? So this step-by-step process is what is needed from the opposition. That everyone knows that the government has failed. Wait, just a bit. I'll finish. I mean, that aspect is not coming from any of the opposition politicians.
No, but
I mean, here, we know.
Yeah, but Mr. Gunasekara, the Austerity Jayasekara is of course wanting to tie hands now, join hands with tie the knot with the JVP.
He has said that.
He had said that. You don't know.
No, he may have said that, yes.
Because as a person who is in this political game for a very long time, I am sure you know that the Austerity Jayasekara said that.
Yeah, he may have said that, yes.
You're aware, right?
Yes.
So, what about that? That's a...
Well, the question is, I fundamentally feel that statement should not have been made, because you are promoting the JVP to respond, which is too premature.
Yeah, but a lot of people viewed it as a white piece of paper, the JP to be the white piece of paper and the SLFP to be the black dot. So that didn't go that well.
No, I mean, they must first come with a program, what they are going to do and all that. So if that is a workable program, workable, agenda sort of, then
but we hear
the people
those
will rally around
no,
that. So as there's no such program coming from the opposition, if it is coming from the JVP, let's sit down and discuss about it. But here, promoting an individual, promoting a candidate won't help this crisis, because we are having a failed government here. We don't want to get the next government to be failed.
Dr. Pereira, I want to address this question to you because you represent the United National Party. You've been, the UNP has been in the driving seat of the country. They have also been part of the opposition. And Mr. Tennokon pointed out the fact that you need policies and you need to give the people an action plan. But so far, we have only seen, without any sort of allegiance, we've only seen the NPP or the JVP coming out with an action plan, and they also recently held their representatives convention and whatnot. What is the UNP's action plan to the people? What will you present over the next 3 years to instill some sort of confidence in the people? Okay, we are ready to govern this country come the end of the next 3 years. What sort of plan do you have in place? What sort of plan do you as the opposition have in place to present to the people to get their hopes high once more?
I think during the last general election, one of the biggest problems that we had with the UNP was that the people at the grassroots level felt that we did not care for them. They felt that the UNP was more on the hierarchical level, but rather they did not address the grassroots level. So we firmly believe that we failed at the grassroots level. And I think right now the change in the mindset of the UNP is that they are actually moving more to the grassroots level. They're going to the grassroots level, they're discussing with the people about the issues, why. Basically, we want to know why they did not vote for us. I think, one of the things we decided as a party was to realize that we made mistakes. We accept we made mistakes. And so now, we've been really having discussions at the grassroots level, and looking at the grassroots level, we are trying to gather the information thereby.
Dr. Pereira, you really think the UNP lost the election because of not connecting with the grassroots of the country?
Well, we firmly believe that, because you see, the thing is, at the grassroots level, there were accusations. One of the accusations that we had was, people said that whenever UNP government came, that they did not go and help the voters. They felt that they were not looked after very well. And I think, they would also say, basically that's what the people were saying. The second thing was, people felt that we did not care for them enough, that we did not look after their issues. So right now, we accept the fact that the people rejected us. We do accept that fact. But then now what we are doing really is we are looking at the issues at the grassroots. So what we can say right now, okay, I know what you're...
No, Dr. Perera, I like the way that you speak about dictatorship, you speak about authoritarianism, all that is well understood. With the government,
I'm not
with
saying
the present
we are
government,
not looking at those things.
You said earlier in one of your answers, you said there is so much of dictatorship right now in the country. The president wanted a dictatorship. That is why the 20th Amendment of the Constitution came into play. All that and more, well understood. But you've forgotten that you are pelting stones being inside a glass box. Look at your leader. Look at Ranil Wickremesinghe.
What is wrong with Ranil Wickremesinghe?
Isn't he a dictator himself?
No, he's not. He is. I mean, the reason why you are saying is because you are looking at him from outside. And while we are working with him right now,
21 million people in Sri Lanka are looking at him from outside, and probably only 200 people in the working committee are looking from him inside.
You said just now you said that people are now saying Ranil Wickremesinghe and Maithripala Sirisena were far better than what we are.
Better known devils than the unknown. Better known devils than the unknown.
What I am saying is this. Okay, we have to look at the mistakes, errors that we have. Just as the country, parties also have to look at themselves. And then the most important thing is to build up who is with us. Because one of the things that even though you may not believe, but Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe and Rohan Wijewardena, what they are trying to do right now is to build up the youth. Because the youth has to be empowered, and this is one of the most important things.
Building up the youth of the country.
And I know your next question. Your next question is, then why isn't the leadership being given to a younger person? That may be your question.
Dr. Perera, what a pity. You are saying that Ranil Wickremesinghe is trying to build the youth of the country.
Yes, he is. Because recently, I don't know whether you know about it, he brought in 3 people to the governing board, 3 youths. I mean, who are not that experienced, but nevertheless he brought them in because the reason being he wanted to give them an opportunity.
Right.
So what I am saying
all that could have been done, Dr. Perera, on a prolonged period of time. Right now, look at the way in which the UNP does not even have
economy. I mean,
the UNP didn't even have a proper candidate for 1.5 years to field in parliament from the national list. That is the political bankruptcy the UNP is in, isn't it?
That was not the reason.
What was the reason?
At that time...
Tell me what's the reason?
At that time, what we felt was people rejected the United National Party at the parliamentary election. And so, we were to send someone...
If that is the case, Ranil Wickremesinghe would have won his parliamentary seat from Colombo if he was not rejected. He was also rejected.
Yeah, I know. So that's why we felt, why should somebody go to the parliament in order to represent the party? But nevertheless, later on, what we felt was when the government was failing in economy, what we felt was it was an opportunity for him to go there and to discuss.
Dr.
And now
Perera,
he has
better,
given
it would have been better.
I mean, he's
Dr.
the
Perera,
one who has asked to.
It would have been
he's the one who has been saying, go to the IMF. Why are you going to different countries and borrowing money? Why aren't you going to the IMF?
It would have been better if Ranil Wickremesinghe gave that parliamentary seat to the opposition, like the JVP.
No. Don't say that. I think I have a feeling that you see, United National Party is the oldest party. It has done so much for this country in terms of agriculture. If you remember, some of the leaders, they worked so hard with the people, like Dudley Senanayake, without corruption. When Mr. Dudley Senanayake died, there was hardly any money in his bank account. But look at today, who the leaders are in this country. How much money are they taking from the people? How much corruption is there? If people like Dudley Senanayake lived today, this would not be the case. So what I'm saying is, don't just say UNP party and it's not like that. UNP is a very strong old party and you can't give the leadership to someone of that party just like that. You need to train them, and it is happening right now.
But Dr. Ajanta, Mr. Arjuna Ranatunga left the party recently, saying that he was a part of the party in order to protect it and support it, but now nothing's been happening. He left
No,
the
I
party.
think I don't know why the reason Arjuna left. Arjuna is a great guy. I mean, he has done great for the country. But the thing is, we do have an action plan. We are going forwards, but we do understand we need to build up the people who are going to be contesting in the next elections. We need to build up the grassroots level, and we are not in a hurry. But at the same time, we are happy that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is in the parliament. Right now, I see very often the questions he poses at the parliament are very, very relevant, and we are so happy that he's raising his voice there. And
But
at the
don't
same
take too
time,
long. Don't take too long, Dr. Pereira. People will forget the UNP. Because now it's the youth who are dominating.
But how can you say people will forget UNP? I think even the my friend who's right at the end, I mean, who knows where he might end up very soon.
Kirti.
So I have a, we
What I
never
am
know
saying,
who is coming.
why we had discussion with the UNP, yes, it's the rallying point with the Greens, right? I mean, it was weak, of course. I mean, they have to put their things together. And moreover, we saw that the UNP, old leadership, Ranil Wickremesinghe and all that, they are not comfortable. At least they are not talking about, talking with the opposition. The other part is SJB and the other elements who was ensured their victory in 2015. So at least to put these two people together is our, we just try to do that just because, I mean, nothing on that front, just because at least we have to ensure that at least when there's human rights violations taking place, like with Asad Salih, is what happened with Asad Salih. So there are some people under the PTA, they had detained some 10-12 people, very concerned people. Everyone knows the story behind that, but the opposition is not making a voice of that. And when it comes to the very other issues, when it comes to the economy and all that, when it comes to the environment, health, education, all these concerned factors were neglected from the opposition. The role of the opposition is not doing that. So that's why we try to put some sort of a platform to start that particular dialogue there. So it's not an issue that we are going to the UNP or we are joining.
Something that happened in 1992 with the UNP. Split the party.
Sorry?
Split the party again.
I mean, there's nothing. There's the UNP and the coalition has split into six partitions down there. They are not looking facing.
Don't say UNP. Says SJB went away from
Boy,
UNP,
what I'm talking about is
splitting.
the the great grand UNP.
So glad that I put you in this corner and put Dr. Ajanta on this corner.
Very.
Anyway, Professor Vitarana, now, this government had a lot of opportunities. We spoke about them before as well. The 6.9 million people voted in favor of them, 2/3 majority, 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Basil Rajapaksa was elected to Parliament, was appointed to Parliament. Then he became the Finance Minister. So a lot of opportunities were given by the people as far as this government is concerned. However, one of the reasons that this government made a lot of mistakes when it came to the human rights aspects of it, as articulated by Kirti as well as Dr. Ajanta. One of the biggest issues that are plaguing the country at the moment is the appointment of Venerable Galaburatte Gnanasara as the head of the One Country, One Law task force. What is your opinion about it?
Well, I certainly don't agree with that appointment as being suitable and appropriate. And now, a committee is drawn up initially of people who are have a certain degree of expertise in relation to the subject that is allocated to them. Now, what is being done there in my way of thinking, is not really a serious effort to work out a solution. And it's really a show which has been put out for the, shall I say, public consumption. Because in a matter like this, I think all the parties that are involved in the political field, at least the leaders or representatives, should come together and have a discussion, work out some type of common understanding. So that whole exercise is something which I really don't.
Professor, are we heading towards a military authoritarian rule?
That certainly is one of the fears that I have and that many others have, because in the recent years have had the military playing a big role in the governance of the country.
Civil administration.
Hmm?
Civil administration.
In the civil administration. And that should never happen. There should be a proper civil administration which takes full responsibility, and this administration should be elected by the people and should be sensitive to the opinions of the people and their requirements. And that whole process should address the variety of problems that say different groups, different sections of our society are confronted with. Now, when you
look
have
at some of the statements, Professor Vitarna, when you look at some of the statements that were made by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, saying that he could hold the people from their neck and ask them to go and grow with organic fertilizer, but he's not doing that. What is that aggression?
No. You see now.
No, because you're also smiling, the people are also smiling.
Yeah.
No, people are not smiley.
Say, being a scientist, I'm aware that over a period of maybe a decade, there have been various groups who have been researching on this question of organic farming and its application to different conditions. You see, the soil in one area is not identical with the soil in another area. So you have to study the soil, the climatic conditions, what is best grown in a certain area.
Because the secretary,
for instance, the seed varieties. We have to now we have become dependent on foreign hybrid seeds. You see, which is a bad trend over the last 20-30 years. Now we have to get away from all this.
Yeah. So I want to speak
Shamir,
to,
before that, with all due respect to the professor, you talked about this, Galbodate, Nyanasartero and all that. I think everyone want to know, I mean, what's your opinion on the appointment like Judge of Upalia Beratna's appointment, or for that matter, which is the Human Rights Commission is now downgraded, Sri Lankan Human Rights Commission is downgraded. The appointments made to that particular commission was one of the reasons for that particular downgrading factor. I mean, the concern issues related to these appointments. For example, when it comes to the Upalia Beratna, what's your concerns on that? With all due respect, sir.
Professor Dharana, you can not answer that question, or you can say pass and leave it as it is, as a Sri Lankan batsman would do now.
No, Rasul, I don't think. I mean, we are inspired by Professor Tisa, people of the caliber of Tisa
because you speak about an appointment to the judiciary. I don't think it's
Upalia Beratna is an appointment to the Information Commission.
Yeah, Information.
Or Disappearance Commission for that matter.
Those commissions are regulated by Presidential Task Force and so on and so forth. So, if you want to miss that question, Professor Tarana, you could do so.
I would prefer to miss that.
All right.
That's not
anyway.
Professor Tisavitharana, we know.
So I want to come back to Mr. Gunasekar, but before that, one of our learned viewers who is watching the show tonight, I'm getting a lot of questions today from most of our viewers. So one of our leading learned viewer is asking, reminding Dr. Pereira, the UNP didn't lose at the last election because of the connection with the grassroots, but they lost because under Ranil Wickremesinghe's leadership, when they came to power, they said that they will inquire into the death of Tajuddin. Didn't happen. They will inquire into the death of Lasantha Wickrematunge. Didn't happen. And some of the journalists. Why didn't they fulfill or allow investigations to proceed and punish the culprits? And if that happened, this government wouldn't be in power.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's a party where I belong, I also have to say, basically, one of the major mistakes that we have made in Sri Lanka, not only by the UNP, by everyone, is that there has been so much of corruption and no one has taken them to task. And this is an overall thing for Sri Lanka. Every party, even right now, nobody talks about the corruption. Nobody talks about how much money is being taken. Everyone is trying to talk about where we can get the next loan. Everyone is talking about how are we going to survive. But nobody talks about how are we going to end the corruption. And this is a sad story. Because if I had the country right now...
Are you trying to say the UNP was not guilty of that during their tenure in office?
Sorry?
Are you trying to say the UNP was not guilty of corruption during the 2005, 2015, 2020?
All the parties had their own corruption. But the issue that we have is no one took them to task.
Why did you join the UNP? Why did you join the UNP if it was corrupt?
I joined the UNP basically because it's one of the leading parties, that one of the oldest parties.
Where are your principles?
I look at what the UNP has achieved for Sri Lanka.
But where are your
principles?
Years. Where are your principles? Where are your principles?
I mean, basically within the party, I still do the. I mean, like for me personally, one of the most important thing is the environment and on sustainable development. And this is the issue that we are handling in the UNP right now. We are also trying to develop economy which is based on sustainability and environmental issues. And this is something that we are actually going to put forward very soon.
Right.
So coming back to that question about the corruption, I'm really saddened. I think if all four of us can stop right now, forget our parties and say, we want to end corruption, I think that's where we should be going. Because even 2022 would not make any difference until we talk about the corruption. We try to find the corruption of every government and ensure that we do something about it and put people behind bars. If we don't do that, where are we going to go?
At least, Dr. Pereira, I can safely say I've known Kirti for some time. I've interviewed Professor Vitarana for many occasions during my last 18 years career as a journalist. I've known Mr. Gunasekar also for that long. I can safely say that three gentlemen onto your right should be absolved from even being interconnected with corruption, because all of them are very clean and have been engaged in politics very steadfastly as gentlemen as far as the Sri Lankan political culture is concerned.
No, what I am saying is, here we are representing different parties. Parties are not important for Sri Lanka right now, as far as I am concerned. What we need right now are groups of people who are like-minded, who say enough of corruption. I mean, what is the use of us taking any loans anymore, and we know it's going to end up in somebody else's pocket? I mean, look at the Express Pearl ship issue. $5 billion is the amount for the compensation. What is MIPA doing? Maritime Environmental Protection Authority.
Wait, I want to.
They are.
No, I just want to correct that figure. I want to ask that from you again. How much money is due for Sri Lanka because of the Express Pearl issue?
$5 billion.
I think you should immediately go and have a chat with Ajit Niwat Kabra, the governor of the central bank.
Yeah.
He would love this proposition. You should, Dr. Pereira, immediately go and speak to the governor of the central bank, saying there's 5 billion lying out there. Why not tap that 5 billion?
Okay, let me finish that. MIPA knows that. MIPA is the authority. They know that. But do you know what MIPA is doing right now? The insurance company of the Express Pearl ship is here in Sri Lanka to investigate. MIPA is working with the insurance company, and the insurance company, which has to pay us, is the one who's trying to calculate. And now they have come down to about 300 million US, saying that would be the compensation, because MIPA has become helpless. And I don't know where the rest of the money is going to go. Maybe into somebody's pocket, I don't know. Right. So we have put a court case, and at the moment we have a court case which we are continuing, right, in order to ensure that we get the full compensation to Sri Lanka.
Mr. Gunasekara, when there's just from that point I want to just pose a question to you. When we have areas like this where we can address and actually get the money, the compensation to address the environmental damage, the turtles, there's all sorts of problems that we had. We were very concerned about the compensation that we had to pay for the ship that was carrying the Chinese fertilizer. We were trying to pay someone else without addressing or without asking where the compensation that we deserve. So it's a bit confusing there, the priorities, because it's very obvious. We saw the damage that was caused to the environment. We saw how the fishermen were affected. But nobody is talking about the money that we are supposed to get. But we are trying somehow to keep our relationship going well with China, so we are trying to pay them the money.
You're right. I feel when you look at it, yes, it sounds, and it is in that respect totally wrong. The question here is, I feel with regard to the ship disaster, as to what agency has worked out a program as to how we are going to get compensation. I don't think anybody has done that. The ministry, the department, everybody needs to put their heads together to fight this matter out. As to whether they have done that, I don't think so. In this country, this is what is happening, you know. No agencies are fighting for the country. No departments are fighting for the country. No ministries are fighting for the country. That's the issue.
But the
very sad.
But what's disappointing is that we know what the problem is. We can see what is happening. It is very clear. We know that an immediate solution should be given, but instead we are trying to tax the people. For example, certain decisions made by the central bank, certain instructions passed on by the central bank to the general public when it comes to the dollar conversions. Even the Bar Association of Sri Lanka recently filed a case saying that it is illegal to force someone to convert your dollar, especially when they do foreign consultations and stuff like that. So end of the day, whatever said and done, end of the day, it's the people that have been taxed and the people who are suffering, standing in queues, staying in hunger, worrying about a food shortage. But everybody comes and talks about it, but no one is doing anything about it.
That's correct. No, I feel, in fact, I have said this before also, as to why we got into this position. The central bank has not submitted a report. The treasury has not submitted a report. Nobody has submitted a report as to why we are in this situation.
No, but they were summoned by the cabinet of ministers.
That's
today.
it. Summoning by a cabinet is not an answer. No, we need to understand. We need to know. The public needs to know from the central bank as to why we are in this position today, as to what went wrong, and didn't they foresee this 1 year back, 2 years back? Didn't they foresee? And what action did they take? The question is, if no reports are available, then it's a serious problem. That is what happened.
Mr. Gunasekara, are you happy with Sri Lanka's foreign policy over the past year?
Well, the question is this, you need to understand that we need to work in such a way that we are not isolated. We have to work in tandem with the countries. And in that respect, we know foreign countries, that's very essential. And I feel that certain decisions that have been taken in the past are not in that
let's talk about specifically the Trinco oil tank farm. We know today it was announced that a special purpose vehicle is going to be established to develop the Trinco oil tank farms. A lot of commentators have been saying that this is a way of easing the tension between New Delhi and Sri Lanka, because we seem to be aligning more towards China in recent months, and this was part of a deal between the two nations or the authorities thereof to provide emergency lines of credit and currency swaps and all sorts of financial assistance to Sri Lanka at the cost of the Trinco oil tank farms being finally given away to India or being jointly developed, so to speak. So is that a viable option?
The question is, the oil tanks have been there for so many years without anybody taking any action, which I felt was a big mistake. Now the question here is as to what the government has done, what successive governments have done with regard to dealings with India, China, etc. You know, you need to understand India is our closest neighbor. We are aware as to what they have done in the past. But irrespective of what they have done, we need to maintain a good rapport with India, because India is the closest to our country. In that respect, we have not done carried out certain activities in the best interest of India.
In that case, how can we better manage our foreign policy in 2022?
This is the issue. That's what I said, you know, you can't get closer to any country, but at the same time, build a rapport, build a relationship with them. If we had done that, if we had done that in the past, we wouldn't have been in this position. So you hand over certain things to China, naturally India is going to flare up, US is going to flare up, all those things are going to come up. Managing all those is not going to be that easy.
So we have a question from one of our viewers. I'm getting a lot of questions today from our viewers.
Yeah, but you didn't ask that question from me. You were right throughout saying, I'm going to ask you.
I will ask you, Mr. Gunasekara. Trust me, when I say I'll ask you a question from you, I will ask you the question. Don't worry about it. So one of our viewers are posing a question to Dr. Pereira. Dr. Pereira, you spoke about the fact that how political parties had been corrupt. So the question revolves around or skirts around the same subject. The question is, how could you have joined the UNP, which was so corrupt and it turned a blind eye towards many cases and did not finish any cases in time? However, look at this government as an example. They brought in fundamental rights issues, cases, and have been able to get away and absolve themselves from many of the cases that the UNP brought in at the time that they were in power. And you are part of this group now.
So what they're saying is basically this government has solved the problem? Or
no, not solved. They've absolved themselves. They've most cases they were able to clear themselves or clear their names on most of the cases that were brought in by the UNP government.
Yeah, but
if the UNP government
even the cases that have been, like for example, the cases that people have accused UNP of, has it still been proven? This is the issue that we have. People have put forward the cases saying that there were corruptions, but up to now they have not been proven. So basically, this is what we need to really, I mean, this is why I say it doesn't matter whether it's UNP or this government. What I'm saying is, if there are cases, then people need to take it forward and prove and make sure that those people who have done the wrong have been punished. I mean, this should happen. But the only thing is, the cases that have come against UNP so far has not been proven. So, so they cannot say to me that I have joined the whole a party which has all these corruptions. But at the same time, I want to say something very specific about the UNP party. UNP party has done a lot for this country. You cannot say that UNP is a party that has not done much for this country. They have done, if you really look at the developmental work, the number of industrial zones and things that they have built.
No, Dr. Pereira, I'm not talking about the work that was done by the Premadasa era. All those were very, very well said.
They have developed the economy.
No. We are not talking about those eras. The UNP was once a very celebrated party. Look at Lalita Mudali's time as the Minister of Ports. I think he was the person who was able to steer the Ports Authority to where it is right now. Look at what Governor Dissanayake did with the Mahavali projects. Look at what individuals in the UNP have done. Now, we are not questioning about the past
your
era.
question was,
My
why
question
did I
is about the Ranil Wickremesinghe era. My question is about that era.
But Ranil Wickremesinghe himself has also done a tremendous amount for education, for economy. During his time, he has developed so many universities. He has given so much of assistance to, to uplift even the government
Dr. Pereira,
servants.
There was a mansion in Sri Lanka. They wanted to hold the now finance minister responsible for it. That mansion, there are no owners. Look at the predicament of your government at that time.
Well,
that Daisy Auntie's properties. What did the UNP government do? Aren't we in this mess today? Today the Rajapaksas are reigning supreme in Sri Lanka. Isn't it because the UNP government, which was appointed to power in 2015 for good governance to take place, because they didn't do their job, we are in this predicament at the moment, and that is why the UNP should also be held responsible for our situation now.
When you put it that way, the joint effort of the SLFP and the UNP at that time, it failed. It utterly failed. Not only it utterly failed.
Ranil Wickremesinghe took Maithripala Sirisena as his driver, not as a passenger or a team player. That happened. We saw that. After the 90th Amendment of the Constitution came into play, there was many issues that cropped up. As a result of that, the 52-day government came into play. We saw all these problems. Didn't it crop up because of? You can't point the finger directly at the SLFP.
Okay, so people. That's why people actually said no to that government, and actually it split and it was a failure. But if you really look, why don't we look at the 19th Amendment and the 20th Amendment? Can't we see the difference between the two? The UNP government brought in 19th Amendment, which we all know today is the very best for the country. But look what we have ended up with, the 20th Amendment. So what I am saying is this, okay, there are good pros and cons of all the government.
I'll tell you, I'll just give you a classic example, Dr. Pereira. 18th Amendment to the Constitution came into play because Mahinda Rajapaksa wanted to contest the elections. Yes. 19th Amendment to the Constitution came into play because Ranil Wickremesinghe wanted to rule the government. Wait. 20th Amendment to the Constitution came into play because Gotabaya Rajapaksa wanted to control the country, and they wanted Basil Rajapaksa to come in as the Minister of Finance through the nationalist.
But 19th Amendment not only gave power to the Prime Minister, maybe
is my analogy
can
right?
also answer.
Yeah,
But
I agree with you.
the
to add on your question, when it comes to the 19th Amendment, these commissions and some of the elements of the 19th Amendment was well drafted in 2013, if my memory is correct, when the Sobita Theros movement was established and all that. For example, the increasing the number of female representation down there, the proposal came in Putlam when we had a civil society organization meeting down there. And at that particular time, Mr. Range Bandara, the present General Secretary of the UNP, was down there with us that particular meeting because it happened in his district, of course. Some of the elements drafted well before the UNP was in line with that particular, effect to come in. So it was, it's a coordinated work. Now the UNP and the SLFP differently try to take the credit, but it was the initiative came from the different entities for that.
So I'm glad Professor Tisavitharan agrees with how the 18th Amendment, 19th Amendment, 20th Amendment came into play. I want to quickly...
There is another aspect.
Yes.
You have to study the people who voted for the 18th, 19th and 20th.
And the 20th.
Yeah. And Professor is one of them, I think.
And you are pointing the finger at Professor Vitharan. No, that's not good.
No, there are certain instances where you vote with the party. That's a different issue. But my question is not that. My question is, check the people who voted for 18th, check the people who voted for 19th and 20th, and see the differences of 18, 19 and 20.
Can I simply put it this way, Mr. Gunasekara? Those who voted, at least the majority of those who voted in favor of the 18th Amendment of the Constitution, 19th Amendment of the Constitution and 20th Amendment of the Constitution are individuals, majority of them, want to fill their own pockets. Look at how Diana Gamage crossed over to the ruling party. Look at how the Muslim members of parliament crossed over to the government because of to create the two-thirds majority. So all this is a farce, Mr. Gunasekara.
There are 13 members of the parliament who voted in favor of 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th Amendment.
So this is all a farce.
They never read it.
The dilemma.
It could well be that they never read it.
No.
It could well be because we know so well that there are many things that get passed in the parliament which they have not read.
No, because
so basically
18th was clear, bringing commissions, but 19th was removing.
Yeah.
You vote for bringing commissions and you vote for removing commissions also.
And knowing the value of the 19th Amendment, knowing the freedom of the commissions, yet they voted for something else, in the 20th Amendment. So what I am saying is, this is what I told you right from the beginning when I started. I said, we have a slave mindset. Even the people who go to the parliament have a slave mindset. They only put their hand up.
Dr. Pereira, I'm sorry to say this. With a lot of respect to you and the work you have done over the last few years and all that, I have to pose this question because you always keep on mentioning about the slave mindset at the end of the day. See, Dr. Pereira, you were a presidential candidate to oust most of these political parties in power. You said the option at that time was not the UNP, the option was not the SJB, the option was not the JVP, the option was not the SLFP, the option was not the SLPP, so on and so forth. You've joined the same camp again.
No, I wouldn't say that. There is a, you see, you need to study the politics of Sri Lanka. Basically, a small party. When I contested as a presidential candidate from the Socialist Party, my mindset was basically to make sure that the voice of the smaller people could be heard, because we know that the farming community, the fishing community and those people's voices were never heard. After joining the UNP, I still remain the same there. And at the moment, this is why I'm saying we are working at the grassroots level.
Right.
Because I personally, even though I am in the UNP party, at the moment in decision-making policy levels, we are bringing the mindset of those people into the policies, which may not have happened before. But at the same time, what I'm saying is, at the moment, I'm working with a larger crowd, and I'm have a bigger crowd to work with. And I'm trying to bring about the changes that are happening in the country.
Right. So Mr. Gunasekara, I have to get back to you. I promised you that I want to pose a question to you.
No, I'm not insisting on that.
No, I have to pose this question to you because I've written it down. I have to pose this question to you. Mr. Gunasekara, we've seen you coming on the show for a very long time, and I've interviewed you since 2015. Since we started hosting Face the Nation in view of the change of political culture in Sri Lanka. You've always been very vociferous. You've always been direct. You've never minced your words. You've always been very upfront. You've always called a spade a spade. Do you think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa can govern the country?
I have answered this question, but I will answer again. As far as I'm concerned, I've been in this political structure since 1978, and therefore I have observed so many presidents coming and going. I felt that a non-political person could do a better job if he is surrounded by experts. I feel that is where he has failed.
Now, Professor Tissavitharana is an expert.
Yeah.
He is surrounding. Are you surrounding President Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
Not at the moment for you.
No, at least you are part of the coalition government. You are at his disposal any time. He could consult you and he can contact you. He can ask for your advice. Am I right, Professor Vitharan?
Yes, sure.
And you are at his disposal to give him advice whenever it is necessary. Look at him. Now, Kirti Tendukon said that he is an expert, and we know the work he has done to combat pandemics across the world. He is not taking their advice.
No, that's what I said. I said that is where he has failed. Because question is this: you got to understand a leader.
Because when you are a president, you are surrounded by people. You can pick and choose.
No. You have to wait until I reply.
Yeah.
The question here is this: there are people to surround a president. Once he becomes a president, there will be so many people. The question is, you have to understand that he should be surrounded by good people. Huh? As to whether that is happening is my question.
Who are the bad people who surround the president?
No. He has to be surrounded by good people. You got to understand there are so many people who come. But you listen to a few, because you know that they are giving you honorable advice.
So
as to whether he has failed in that, I don't know.
Right. The option right now is the president to have good people surrounding him and
giving him advice, proper advice.
Professor Vitharana, now we've spoken about the mess that we are in right now. We've spoken about how bad 2021 has been for the government, the people, and the nation as a whole. What must we do to get out of this mess? Can we get out of this mess? Let me rephrase it.
It's going to be very difficult. And let us, shall we say, it's going to be a hard struggle where the real needs of the people need to be addressed. As I mentioned earlier, I got scientific data which showed that 60% of families in Sri Lanka, the income is below the poverty line. So that is, we are having 60% households with inadequate income to provide them with their needs. Then 18% are suffering from malnutrition. Now, the question is, these matters should be given the highest priority. The fact that I know there are many people who are having just only 1 meal a day. And if you look around the country, the level of hardship through which people are suffering is something that needs immediate attention. But from the point of view of the political sphere or even the media for that matter, which should be bringing up these matters, right? There doesn't seem to be any concern about that situation. And for instance, I took up this matter. Now I'll give you two examples, quite concrete examples. One is I spoke to the Prime Minister and said that the major issue confronting the people at the moment is the question of hunger, that they are not having sufficient food, and that I would request him to postpone some of the non-essential projects that are being implemented and immediately ensure that those who are going hungry are provided with food by the government. Right? It may be dry rations or whatever it is, right? And his response was that these development projects have been started, the plans have been drawn up, the money has been collected, and they should not be interrupted. They should go ahead. Then I said, now isn't the immediate need to feed the people who are not having sufficient food? So then he promised to look into the matter. Right? Then now there is this question of the cost of living. Why these people are going hungry is because the cost of food is so high that they cannot afford it with the income that they receive. So I met the Minister of Cooperative Affairs and I said, let us revive the cooperative movement the way it was years ago and ensure that you have both producer cooperatives as well as consumer cooperatives, and let them interact directly without going through this middleman. If you look at the situation today in the country, the farmers are being underpaid by middlemen who exploit them. Then there is this whole run right up to from retail to wholesale, and then wholesale back again down to retail, where each person makes his or her own profit, and then it comes to the consumer.
So what happened after that?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm sorry to say that he said, yes, the cooperative movement was good at one time, but now it has these defects and these defects and these defects, and that they cannot be corrected. So I said, from my own party, the SLFP, we will help you with all our though limited capacity to get this cooperative movement functioning properly. And he said, okay, he will look into the matter, and that was that.
Kirti, interesting thoughts, no?
No, I mean, there's a quote by Machiavelli saying the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the man who has surrounded him. Right? So the issue here with this government is very, very clear. When you go to the health issues, the people like Professor Tisavitarna is ignored and some other people is given priorities and all that. Right? I mean, here I am a firm believer on social democracy and all that. Having said that, here we don't have resources, we don't have money, we don't have dollars, we don't have even the food at the moment to, equally divided among these people. So the concept of social democracy, I mean, yes, that's good, we are for that, but here is that can be implemented. There are no resources. So then to address these issues, we have to think out of the box. So wealth creation might be one factor. I mean, we have to look in, right? So, I mean, if we don't have wealth, so how can we equally divided with the people and all that? So the wealth creation has to come into it. Having said that, so when you go for the foreign programs, projects, investments for that matter, don't forget the fact, if my memory goes back to 2016, Mr. Cornel Pereira, the former chairman of the Hilton, was down there in a talk show with Face the Nation, of course. And at that particular time, Hilton was given a bid, 200 million rupees. Sorry, 200 million US dollars as an investment. Now it has revalued to something like 75 million. Still there's no buyer, right? At that particular time, if we really needed to get a solid investor and do a real good job down there with that particular property, piece of land and the property, of course we had ample time, and we ignored that particular investment opportunity. Now we are going, someone is going to make a killing out of it.
Yeah. So, so I'll come back to you, Dr. Pereira, but I want to pick Mr. Gunasekara's brain on this. Mr. Gunasekara, you said that good people have to surround the president. Good or intelligent and capable people?
Both. Both. But I prefer if businessmen are not there. Because the question is, when no sooner a businessman comes into the picture, his interests overrides everything. That's the problem. We had good, in the past we had good businessmen who gave good advice to leaders. We had good businessmen who gave good advice to leaders. But today, in today's context, I don't see that.
But what do you think is the way forward for Sri Lanka?
Shamil, just give me 1 or 2 minutes. You got to understand that we are in this position today. There has been a decline for several years, I feel, gradual decline. As to whether the recovery is overnight, no, it's not possible. It may take even 10-15 years for the recovery. Now, many people might even assault me on the road when I say this, but recovery is not easy. Recovery is extremely, I'm telling you now, today, mark my words, recovery minimum 10-15 years. Because Sri Lanka is not something you can turn around overnight.
No, you are saying businessmen, the equation don't work. Now look at countries like Singapore.
Yeah.
Mr. Gunasekara.
I didn't say that.
They've done
the businessman.
well.
No, it's the businessman who drive
look
the
Look
economy.
at Mahathir Mohamad's Malaysia.
No. It's the businessmen who drive the economy of this country. But we have got a culture of businessmen who are only worried about themselves and their business.
Commission merchant.
That is the problem.
Okay.
Commission merchant.
That's the issue.
I just want to raise one little
I don't blame
issue.
businessmen. Now, you got to understand, in this country, I adore businessmen because they are the people who provide employment to millions and millions of people. They are the people who provide employment. But the question here is, people who have come to the forefront as to whether they are doing an honorable job is a question.
with regard to the, one of the major issues on environment I like to talk about is this composting.
Right.
Now, this is a critical factor. We know that we had to pay something like 6.7 billion US as compensation recently.
6.7 million US dollars.
Million.
How much was it?
6.7 million US
Was
dollars.
it million? Okay. So now, look at the number of garbage dumps we have. Meetaramulla, Blue Mandal, Karadiana, we have one in Aruakkalu. Now, if we really wanted to make compost, we could have made use of that, the compost from those dump sites. And I personally wrote to the president, very soon after he became the president, I wrote to him and I told him that I would help him with all this work on composting and recycling. And I wrote to him twice, but he never replied to me. Okay, that's fine. But the question right now is, even now it's not too late, because the farmers need quality compost. And we still have garbage dumps which are creating havoc for the country, and it's a very valuable land that they are sitting on. So if we can really make use of that compost, and I think there are so many professors who know exactly how to convert that compost into a very usable, good fertilizer, they know it.
Right.
But we are not using it. So what I'm saying is, we do have, and Professor Vitan, I mean, he knows what I'm talking about. We've been talking about biogas conversion, for many years now. And, Professor Vitana would be an expert to use in converting whatever we have at the garbage dumps to good fertilizer, which we can give free of charge to the farmers. So there are solutions. Unfortunately, who's going to listen to us?
Right.
Who's going to do what we say?
All right. So I need to go for a short commercial break. Jamal, any questions?
No.
Right. Azra? Right. Need to go for a short commercial break, but before going for the short commercial break, one of the viewers sent me this nursery rhyme that really interested me, and I thought I'll just read a few lines to sum up as to what the government is doing at the moment. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Lisa, dear Lisa. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Lisa. There's a hole in the bucket. Then mend it, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Then mend it, dear Henry, dear Henry, and Henry. And until the end, Henry and Lisa are fighting to make sure that they mend the hole in the bucket, but they couldn't do so. And Sri Lanka right now is facing the same predicament, a hole in the bucket. So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's Face the Nation. We're talking about prospects for 2022 and also how did we fare in 2021. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
COVID-19 සඳහා ආරක්ෂිත පියවර. ජනයා වැඩි වශයෙන් සිටින ස්ථානයන්හි ගැවසීම මගහරින්න. රෝගය ආසාදිත පුද්ගලයන් හමුවීමට නොයන්න. මුහුණ, මුඛය, නාසය සහ ඇස් ඇල්ලීමෙන් වළකින්න. අනවශ්‍ය ගමන් බිමන් යෑමෙන් වළකින්න. මුඛාවරණය ඉදිරිපස ඇල්ලීමෙන් වළකින්න.
Investors too are looking at what can they do in order to maximize their returns on this very dynamic capital market.
It's difficult to expect continued strong performance in the near term from capital markets.
I believe by the economies coming together as a region, the aim is to go further.
The EU stands for an open trading system, for a rules-based multilateral system. So there are so many regulations that are come to do what is called corporate governance.
Ethical marketing, ethical reporting really comes into play in a situation like this.
There has to be a new economic, agriculture and business model for the Sri Lankan tea industry.
The inventor thinks this is a fantastic idea, a product. The business person thinks, no, you cannot adapt it to the system.
How important is managing emotions in the workplace?
If you treat your soldiers like your sons,
they will face any backlash.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. I would like to thank our viewers for sending in questions. You could also join in with the conversation. Just go to our Facebook page, like it, and then you can pose questions to us. The Facebook page is Face the Nation TV1. That's Facebook stage that you can get yourselves connected with us and then pose your questions to the audience as well. That's one way of doing so. Or else you can pose your questions in the Facebook Live, which is on News First while the program is on, and we'll be glad to take up those questions as well from the panelists who are attending the show, just as you all did today. I start my final round with Dr. Ajanta Pereira, representing the United National Party today on the show. What is the way forward for Sri Lanka, and what must the government do? If it was a piece of advice that you want to give the government, if the government was to listen to you, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I think the most important thing right now for the government itself is to take a little break and think. Enough of stealing, enough of corruption. I think this is what should happen, because I think the corruption and the stealing has happened for too long. And even if we take loans, unless that loan is invested in something which would give an economic output, we are going to be at a loss. If we take a loan, in order to pay a loan, we will fail. But if we take a loan in order for us to invest in industries where there is an output, we will be able to make some money. So we need to understand the gravity of the situation that we are in. And the most important thing right now is the monitoring. You know, we have failed. As a country, we have failed for many years. We have, all what we have done is we've taken loans, and we have never kept records as to what has happened. And therefore, no one has even monitored as to what's happening. And we have become a country which is not transparent in financial matters. And this is why we have ended up in this particular situation. And right now, we need to forget about our party politics. Time has come for us to forget about our colors. The most important color is the flag of Sri Lanka. And therefore, what we need to do is, we need to sit together and to see where we can minimize the corruption, where we have gone wrong, and to make a good assessment of ourselves and see how we can make it better. One of the most important things is in the decision making. I do not know how for 72 years we have made wrong decisions all along in terms of where we get the funds from, how we run the projects. You know, it's sad to see how Sri Lankans have continued to make the wrong decisions, in the sense of who are the people who have been making these decisions. It's not trying to offend them, but to say time has come for us to look at ourselves very well in the mirror and decide how should we run the country better. And I think the president must talk to the opposition. Even though he has got the 20th Amendment passed, the most important thing for him right now is to ensure that he talks to all the parties involved. He needs to have dialogue with all the parties, and he needs to understand what they are also trying to say. We need to end corruption, we need to invest properly, we need to develop our country economically, because unless we ensure that the agriculture and the industries are well built and we are able to get a good return, we will not be able to run the country for very long. And the most important thing is the transparency and also monitoring. So enough of party politics. I think time has come now to ensure that we look after the flag of Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka doesn't have anyone else. China won't come, India won't come, no one will come to make sure that we prosper unless we Sri Lankans, regardless of all differences, we Sri Lankans need to hold hands together and develop this country. I don't think it's ever too late, because we still can see a miracle. We believe in miracles, and miracles can happen.
Thank you very
much. But for a miracle to happen, the biggest miracle is that the president will change and shake hands with all the parties.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta Pereira. I think you stand corrected only at one point of the statement that you made. We right now need the international community to cement us and cushion us with some foreign exchange to make sure that we are out of this mess in terms of the forex crisis that is plaguing the nation. Because at the moment, most of the industries, like the exports, are being affected severely as a result of the current crisis, the predicament that we are in terms of the forex crunch that we are experiencing at the moment in Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament and Councillor, Dehola Mount Municipal Council, representing the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
For us, you asked a question from Professor Tisavitharan as to whether there is a possibility of recovery. This is what my response would be to that question. We need to understand that we are on a downward slide. As the initial, my initial reaction to that is, we have to stop the slide. If you don't stop the slide, we are in trouble. And 2022 would be the beginning of that effort as to whether we can all get together and work out an arrangement as to how we are going to do that is left to be seen. But everybody in Parliament needs to understand that each and every member of Parliament is responsible for governance. I've always maintained that many people think that the ruling party only governs. No, no, no. The members in the opposition also are equally responsible. All 225 is responsible. So in that context, they need to get together and work out a program where you can stop the slide. It's very essential. And two, we need to understand that there are basic essentials of any man. Rice, milk powder, flour, is very essential. These items, lentils, very essential. These items must be available at a reasonable price always. If the government cannot ensure that those items are available at a reasonable price, we are in trouble. Do you know that this government, I blame the government, I fault the government. Over the last 5 to 6 months, the increase in diesel is almost 16 to 17%. You increase the price of diesel by 16 to 17% over a period of 5 months. You are in serious, you are putting the country in serious trouble because everything goes up. Everything goes up in price. And what? The major item are the consumables. As Professor Vitharana said, we have not looked at the people who are suffering, who are unable to eke out a living to make ends meet. Those people have been suffering for the last 2 years. And have we looked after them is a big question. And are there programs on foot to look after them? I doubt it very much. These are matters that Parliament needs to sit and thrash out. I don't think those things are happening in Parliament. But if you follow the proceedings of Parliament, none of those things are happening. We need parliamentarians to look into those areas of activity and then see what changes could be made. Because the poorest of the poor, if they are not well looked after, we are in serious trouble. And that is exactly, and cement relations with other countries. It's very, very essential that you cannot move alone. You have to have friends in other countries, especially the countries that buy our exports. It's not some of the countries that are buying our exports. The countries like US are buying our exports, not anything else, not any other country. So look after those people, look after those countries, have good relations to ensure that we can move out and stop the slide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunasekara, for your thoughts in the final round. Are we really on a slide, or are we on a? We've already.
I said I used a diplomatic term. That's a diplomatic term.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure you can,
Mr. Gunasekara. We'll let the people interpret it the way that they want to.
Exactly.
So I now move attention to Keith Tendekon, former governor of the Southern Province.
Shamila, the first thing I think, if you are looking for a prosperous or manageable 2022, we need some sort of a financial discipline, and financial discipline is the key to overcome this situation. Without a financial discipline, we cannot look forward for any sort of a solution into this situation. The other main concern factor is that next year we have to face is the energy crisis. We know that we are having very limited resources in related to the Norochole coal plant. So that element will be a major factor. And Sapugaskanda is might be not operating within no time. We know that that element of is happening, and when it comes to the Ceylon the Petroleum Corporation, we are also having a major crisis. All in all, that might definitely lead into a fuel crisis within no time. The other very concerned factor, as Professor Tisavitharana very correctly said, that the malnutrition or the food security of the country. After this very stupid decision of imposing chemical fertilizer ban and not importing the relevant pesticides, weedicides and all other elements to grow this country, the crops and all that, we are having a very disturbing reports on the expected number of results when it comes to the food security. So that element has to be addressed, or otherwise we will have a very severe crisis in related to the malnutrition with health factors and so forth. We should, if we are to look into a brighter future in the next year, we are not too late to ensure that this element of the crisis, where at least the people is having enough to eat, our children, our friends, the families must be ensured with enough food, so then the rest of the healthy population will take up the challenges in related to the economic factors. So if we are to address these issues, the energy crisis, economic crisis and the other related factors, definitely we can have some sort of a hope. But to ensure that the financial discipline is the key, so whether or not we are going to fail in 2022 will depend on how far we are going in line with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keith Tendekon, former governor of the Southern Province. I now move my attention to Professor Tisavitharana, Member of Parliament, Sri Lanka Pujana Peramana, representing the ruling coalition.
As far as next year goes, I think we need to look even further down the road. We are an agricultural country. We should have a target, and the target is self-sufficiency in our essentials, especially food. We should, according to a definite plan, clear allocation of funds, which should be prioritized. There should be a whole setup. We have, from the point of view of human resources, we have scientists, engineers of international caliber. We have the personnel to develop our economy. Now, as starting with agriculture, we must make the best use of the land that we have, ensure that we get the maximum yield, and as I said, make sure that people don't go hungry. We focus on the area which is having, shall we say, the biggest problem, that is the problem of hunger, and we must satisfy that. Now there is the question of making food available at affordable prices to everybody. There are people who don't have enough money to even buy at those prices. So the government must step in immediately, identify those people who are unable to buy what is needed for their basic existence, and there should be a program to support them, and at the same time there must be a program to have sustainable development, where those people will be given the training in the necessary skills to make use of the raw material that is available in their areas, have value-added industries developed, so that there should be improvement in our agriculture. For instance, a simple thing. Today the trend in the global agriculture is towards mixed farming. But we are still having monocrop farming. If you have mixed farming, you make up in the soil what one plant needs, the other plant can provide. So that there has to be a planned development of our agriculture. There is no time to go into details. Then from that point, we have to develop value-added industry. Now that value-added industry must be directed first for import substitution. Then at the same time, we have to think in terms of export markets.
Right.
And that course of development is, I think, something which we must start as soon as possible. We are lagging far behind, and we must harness the resources that we have, which are underutilized, with proper scientific planning, which will take our economy forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Tisavitarana, Member of Parliament of Sri Lanka, Podujana Peramuna. Thank you very much, Mr. Kirthendakon, former Governor of the Southern Province of Sri Lanka, Professor Tisavitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka, Podujana Peramuna, Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament, Council in the Heavily Mountain Municipal Council, Dr. Ajanta Pereira, representing the United National Party, for joining us this evening on the show. Thank you very much, Azra. Thank you very much, Jayamal, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. As the year 2021 is coming to a close in a few days, I would like to tell our viewers that every year would bring you your own unique set of victories, defeats, struggles, and also joys. Whatever season of life you are in at the moment, it's important to reflect on how the year went so you can adjust your sails. Take care and good night.